Welcome to the Quinnisode, the cute and dorky cousin of the World of Horror podcast, where we talk classic horror, current horror, our favorite actors, and anything else that strikes our fancy, and our Midwest accents. Hey Quinn, how's it going?
Hey Christina, it's going okay. How are you doing?
I'm doing real good, thanks.
I like that you've added anything that strikes our fancy, because honestly, that's so legit. We don't really have rules.
No, because we just break them anyway.
We just break them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like this new sort of generation of Quinnisodes where we talk about movies that we haven't studied to death for hours and have detailed notes in our brain already ready to go. It makes me feel a little bit dumb, but it also feels really fresh.
Yeah, just fresh takes. Yeah. And yeah, I like it too. And judging by the downloads, people also like it as well. I was going to send you the latest stats, but yeah, I think I told you that it looks like, just from the trends, it looks like people, we'll put out a Quinnisode and people download a bunch of Quinnisodes, And so it's just kind of fun to just see these trends. Or like every once in a while, someone will download like all of the episodes. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you get like 150 downloads in one day or something, all from one location. It's fun.
Very fun.
All right, so today we're going to talk about Heretic. Here are the stats. It's directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods, written by Beck and Woods, starring Hugh Grant, Sophie Thatcher, and Chloe East. The cinematography is by Chung Chung-hun, edited by Justin Lee, music by Chris Bacon. The release dates were September 8th, 2024 at TIFF and November 8th, 2024 in the US. It has a running time of 111 minutes. And I thought that Chung Chung-hun looked like a very familiar name. And that's because he's done a bunch of cinematography for Park Chan-wook. So, like he did Old Boy and he did, the Sympathy series. And so I was thinking about the cinematography. I just don't want to forget to say this. There are a lot of really cool shots. Like one of the first shots in the movie is of the mountains in Colorado is the backdrop. And they're, beautiful images of the sky and things like that. But I think one of the really amazing parts of this movie is a lot of it's dark. It's like in dark spaces and it's lit really, really well. And I think you need a really, adept cinematographer to make that look realistic.
Yeah, that's such a great point. A friend of mine is just watching that show on Apple, Dark Matter.
Uh-huh.
And she just keeps talking about how she cannot see it. And she's like, should I stick with it? And I said, I remember really liking it actually and kind of being hesitant to watch it. But then I did remember people talking about how like literally dark it was. And I mean, that is, you're so right. Like that's such a skill to be able to light darkness and do it. And like you're not straining. I don't know. Cause I have a real problem with that. My eyes they have a tough time like adjusting and going there. And if something seems really, really dark, I kind of want to like just go bye-bye. So that's such a great point.
Yeah, thanks. I felt pretty proud of it.
You're so smart.
All right, so we open with Sister Paxton and Sister Barnes, two Mormon missionaries. Should we call them Mormons or Latter-day Saints? Anyway.
Mormons.
All right. They are having a conversation on a park bench, about Magnum condoms and pornography.
Pornography.
And it's kind of about marketing, but Paxton says that she knew that God was real when she was watching a porno. Because she said she saw this woman's soul leave her body. And so she knew that souls existed, and so therefore God existed.
Mm.
Interesting logic.
It is interesting logic. I like this little exchange because I think it puts you in a place to see it from sort of the eyes of innocence, even though I would say like Barnes is perhaps way more experienced in life, and I think but especially Paxton, but I mean I don't think it's I think that's just an interesting thing to say and an interesting point, and I don't think there's any negating like how one comes to see God, but it's like a kind of adorable anecdote.
Yeah, I love it. And we get a little lovely walk through Boulder, and we see some sorority girls filming a TikTok video. They want to take pictures with the girls, and Paxton is actually pantsed at the end of this exchange because the girls want to know if it's true that they actually wear magic underwear.
Mm.
And that is very upsetting for Paxton. They get to Hugh Grant's place and they lock their bikes up. And there's a really lovely shot. It's like the gate. It looks like a triangle, and the camera pushes through, and you just see the doorway of Hugh Grant's house. His name is actually Mr. Reed, but I'll probably call him Hugh Grant because I can't imagine anybody else playing this part.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just when you were talking about that shot, it just struck me too as like it's kind of it feels a little bit like a setup to a fairy tale just because of his house is so like picturesque bungalow, and all of it does all of a sudden kind of feel a little like Hansel and Gretel.
Yep. Yeah, I thought that too. There are stormy clouds, and I just wrote, "Run, sisters!" But they meet Mr. Reed. Do you want to talk a little bit about what his demeanor is like when he first opens the door and they first meet him?
Yeah. So he is just charming as fuck, right? And he's sweet, and he seems like just this like sweet, adorable older man. And they want to confirm that yes, he did want information about the church, and he says, "Yeah, I guess I did, yeah." And through this exchange, they are apprehensive to go inside because he is a man, and they wonder if there is another woman around because they need to have a woman if they're going to be inside of a house. So I think one of them asks if he has a girl roommate, which is also delightful. And he's like, "A girl roommate? Oh, I have a wife. Is that okay?" And then we kind of picture this inside of his house, like with his wife and whatever. But they say, "Yeah, that's fine." And he lets them in, and then there's a couple other exchanges before they actually sit down. Things that do become important later that do feel a little bit sort of like not important at the moment, especially for Sister Barnes and Paxton. One of the things is that he says, "I hope it's okay that there's metal in the walls and ceilings." And they're like, "Yeah, that's fine. Just a strange thing to say. Obviously, it comes to be important later on more so than at that moment. They're just trying to get their foot in the door. And you do also know that Paxton has not converted anyone as of this point. So Barnes has I don't know how many under her belt, but Paxton has never successfully done it yet. So she is raring to go. She's so excited, and you can see, and you already start to kind of compare these two, and they are different. She is sort of like the picture of innocence and curiosity and passion. And Barnes is just a little bit more, I don't know, maybe more realistic. And I think there is a conversation I think that they have before they even get to Hugh Grant's house that makes you question if Barnes believes this.
yeah, yeah, it was something like after the pornography thing, um, Paxton asked Barnes, "Well, how did you know that Heavenly Father was real?" or something like that. And she's like, "Oh God, I don't know. I guess I never really thought about it." And so, yeah, there's definitely a difference between these two, and Paxton does seem like super eager to talk to Mr. Reed. Um, he seems keen on the conversation too. He's like, one of the first things he says is, "I think it's good to be religious." And they're like, "Oh, wow, this is amazing." Like, that's not the response that they usually get. And there's his whole ruse is that his wife is in another room baking a blueberry pie. And there keeps being the promise of this blueberry pie that's coming. But he's also asking them like off kilter questions, like, where are you from? Did you grow up in the church and all this stuff? And Barnes says that her mom converted after her dad passed away. And they're just sort of having this loose conversation, but he is like glomming onto these details. And so he says, like, did you ever get any signs from your dad, after he passed? And Barnes is like, no, no. And he says, oh, that's weird. So it's, just keeping them off balance throughout this whole conversation. And he asks what the father died of, and he thinks she says blueberry disease, but it's actually Lou Gehrig's disease. And so there's a moment of like silence and tension, and I think it's played really, really well.
Yeah, it's intense. It feels intense. And then I think after this is when he's like, I want to ask an awkward question, can I? And they're like, well, you'll never know. You know that.
There's one moment right before that where Paxton says when she dies, she wants to come back as a butterfly and land on the hands of her loved one so they'll know it's her. And then the lights go out.
Okay.
And it's storming outside. It's starting to storm outside, and so it's a really nice moment because all of a sudden it's just like the shock to the system. And he's like, "Oh yeah, it's a foible of the house. It just does that."
Does he tell them it's on a timer at that point, or?
I don't think yet, but
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, the metal in the walls and the lights just going out. Um, these are huge red flags, but they're ignoring them quite foolishly. As an audience, we're kind of like, get out.
Yeah, they are on a mission, literally. And I like the you pointing out the lights going out, because that's like it's like a door slam or like a big edit type thing where it's like refreshed, like it's important to the story, but it also like it breaks up the conversation too, which this first half of the movie is really heavy with. And I like it, but I think that maybe probably some people need a little bit of those like door slams or
Mm-hmm.
lights going out, those hard edit type things.
Yeah, I think it's a really nice way to, ratchet up the tension. But here's where he asks the really icky question.
Icky. Oh, he's so icky. He's so good. But yeah, he's basically asking what they think about the church's stance on polygamy and then retracting that, and if they think it was to benefit any one of any many group leaders and members, and they I think he's also attempting to like really kind of lay out the fact that, like, do we think it's okay that this religion that is very fully supported can just change like this in a matter of like moments and then go back years later, but it still be a blemish, or is it a blemish, and I think they answer pretty like in a pretty it's a pretty good answer that they give. They're like, I think using research in the church and whatnot. And I don't know. I think that question would probably stop a lot of folks. And it is probably an uncomfortable question. And it is probably something that people within the church get asked a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. And Paxton is I like her body language here. She's kind of leaning back in the chair and she says, yeah, it's sketch for sure. And I just love it that she says that, because Barnes is sort of trying to defend what was going on in the 1800s versus today and all this stuff. And another way that these two girls are very different. And Hugh Grant really seems to like that response. So I think that's when he maybe makes the decision at that comment. But he asked them what's their favorite fast food. Again, it's like, wait, what? Why are we talking about this? And there's this whole thing about what the girls consider to be their favorite fast food, and they settle on Wendy's. And there's a line in there: "We don't talk about Taco Bell." And he's like, why don't we talk about Taco Bell? Well, we'd have to talk about Taco Bell to talk about why we don't talk about Taco Bell. But anyway, he says that if Wendy's is the pinnacle of fast food, he's been trying his whole life to find the pinnacle of religion, the one true religion. And he says he's actually found it. And he goes to get his wife and he leaves the room. And this is when we get the reveal of the candle. And it's a cool shot, but I don't know how to describe the shot. But the label of the candle has been turned toward Reed this whole time, and Barnes turns it around to her, but it's like the camera is also going around the candle.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so it's like this big, very slow, moment. And all of a sudden she sees that the candle is a blueberry pie candle.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, again, I think we've talked about this in just random conversations, but what a shame. And whoever put that trailer together. Yes, it's such a shame the way that trailers are cut these days, and that they are showing these like pretty major important plot points and also points of intense suspense that could have been like so beautifully pulled off with surprise and in a delicate way, but instead it's like all I remember about the trailer is the blueberry pie.
Yeah.
So I already know that there is a situation in which things are not what they seem, and that's a shame because that's a really cool point, or like a little narrative piece of this plot that really, really works and is so well done, but they like gave it away before they even put it out.
And yeah, and I saw that too, and I was, thinking, well, if that's like what they're willing to show in a trailer, certainly there's like this huge reveal, in the movie. And I mean, things do go batshit in the second half of this movie. But I mean, that would have been nice to just have that as a part of the film instead of like sort of waiting for that moment as you're watching the film.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think the way that this film succeeds is because of the beautiful and delicate setup. And I don't know that it does succeed, but we can get to that later because we've talked so much about it. But what we both agree on is that the first part of this movie works so well. And like, I am invested every time I watch it or, go back to clips or whatever. I am interested. I would watch it again later today, and then I would zone out maybe near the second half. But like, it is really well done, and it's well done because of I think it's delicately done with the script.
Yeah.
And the acting, of course. These three are great.
Yeah, they are really, really something special. So he asked them to follow him down this dark hallway, And so Barnes stops before they proceed, and she pretends to get a phone call, and she's like, "Oh yeah, hi, Elder Price." Not Elder Price, but you know,
Hello.
we're here at Mr. Reed's house, and um, but there's no signal in the house, and because of the metal in the walls, and they go to open the front door, and they can't get the door open. Um, and the room is dark, like I was saying before, and it's really, amazing. I think the photography, I'll probably say that a bunch as we're going through this film. But as I was watching it again, that's what I was really focused on, was the cinematography. And it really is pretty impressive if you watch it from that point of view. But they find Mr. Reed in his study, and maybe we could take a moment and describe this room.
Oof. This room is like, I don't know, I think a mix between a library, a church, like someone's basement from the 90s in the north. I don't know.
And there's a cistern in the middle of it.
Yes.
So
yes, and there's like a bit of a like altar with all these and paintings, lots of artwork. And then there are kind of pews as well, I think, right? There are
Yeah.
pews, yeah. And it's just it's like an incredible room. And it's very curious. Like it's just a room like you've never seen and you don't expect it to be in someone's house.
Yeah. Yeah, and the girls comment on it, and they're like, still, it's sort of like that speak no evil kind of thing, where they're still trying to be polite, but, the feeling that there's something not quite right is definitely creeping in. And so how do you navigate that when you're still in that mode where being polite is the most important thing? So they're like, wow, this is an incredible room, Mr. Reed, and all
Yeah.
this kind of stuff.
And for these two, I mean, especially Paxton, the idea that they're in somebody's house for longer than like 3 minutes is probably mind blowing because I doubt that happens very often.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you can imagine how many doors get slammed in these women's faces, So we see a moment of that almost, not a door, but just a rejection, early on in the film. So um, they want their coats back, though. They're ready to go. It's been so nice. You've been so generous with your time, and so they noticed that the bike key lock was in Barnes's coat pocket, but now it's in Paxton's coat pocket. And they're like, okay, well, thinking to themselves, this is really fucked up and weird. And they're like, now we just need your help getting out the front door because the front door won't open. And he says, oh, yeah, it's not going to open till tomorrow morning. Yeah. And again, they're sort of like, well, no, you could open it. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm telling you, I mean, I should have, tripped the latch or whatever before, but I didn't think of it. And yeah, it's not going to open. And it's like such an impossible thing to believe, but they sort of concede that they believe it, finally.
Yeah. And he says, you're going to have to go out the back way. And they're apprehensive about the thought of that because they don't really know how to get from the back to the front. And then I think, Paxton says, we would really like it if your wife could come and walk us through the back to our bikes.
Right. And then there's this wonderful moment where he's like, so they're like, so would you please go get your wife? And he says, yes, I will, if you'll answer me this question. Do you still believe that my wife is in the next room, despite all evidence to the contrary? And that's such a scary question.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I think, like the moment where you're like, these girls are fucked.
Yeah.
This is, yeah.
Yeah, very, very scary. And then, yeah, so he also, I mean, this sort of leads to the question, do you believe in God despite all evidence to the contrary? Like, you live in the world, you know what the world is like,
Right.
and yet, you still say that you believe in God. And Barnes is like, okay, I'm going to go. We're going to go now. And she opens the door to the basement, and then we get that super low angle shot of her when she opening up the door. And it's a really cool shot. And then we get this cool. Our friend Stefan told me that people who don't make films always use the term tracking, but I think it is a tracking shot down the stairs and away from Barnes. So it's just this really cool, showing that the basement is, really deeply underneath the rest of the house. Barnes says, people know where they are. And so, he really needs to let them go because otherwise people are going to come looking for them. And then we get the Monopoly, the Hollies, the three big religions bit, which is a really cool clip. You can look it up online if you want. I think it's one of the strongest parts of the film. And I asked our friend who teaches religious studies if she had seen this film because I think this might be something to show in class. I might want to show it in my class when I teach religion. Do you want to talk about this section?
I mean, I also think it's incredibly cool, and it is very thought-provoking. And I like the comparisons that are made. And, he's basically talking about how there's this original that we think of as the original, and then like a remake and a remake and a remake, but maybe the original is not the original because there are all these similarities of like origin stories of gods and Messiah figures and whatnot. And what's more popular? Is it the original? Is it the remake? Is it the quirky, you know, local version of Monopoly, like your own town's Monopoly or whatever? And it is really thought provoking. And he's delivering it with such confidence, of course, and repetition. And he's doing it in a way that is so very reflective of, like, I don't know, a professor going over something that he or she has gone over many, many times before in such a sort of performative way as well. Mm-hmm. And it could be lost on these two at the moment because they're fucking scared as shit, because it was just revealed that they're not getting out of there tonight through the door in which they came, and no wife exists, and now they're going to have to be like mansplained forever, throughout this night. Yeah. And it's pointed out later that there's some flaws in his logic, of course, but he delivers these lessons with such confidence and repetition that it's like, it's fact. It's not an opinion. This is fact. Yeah, and he uses this point he's explaining the iterations of Monopoly while The Air That I Breathe is playing by the Hollies. And then he says, I know maybe you haven't heard that song, but I bet you've heard Creep by Radiohead. They're like, mm-hmm. No. And he's like, well, he explains like lawsuits and then the Lana Del Rey song and the similarities and everything. Yeah, I like this part a lot.
He makes two really important parts. One, he says that, as there are more and more iterations of the original's message is lost. And he also says that he makes the point that while Judaism might be the OG religion in comparison to Christianity and Islam and Mormonism, it's, there aren't that many adherents to Judaism because they don't go out and proselytize people. like the Mormons do. And so he's like, have you ever really thought about it? I mean, you guys are kind of just doing PR for God, and you're trying to like recruit people just like any other marketing scheme. And I mean, you could draw that comparison, but it's I could see how that could be pretty offensive to a very faithful person.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's so much of it's part of their identity in that religion that it's a necessary component of accepting this life is the proselytizing and like the going out into different communities, international or not, local, whatever. But yeah, it's such a huge part of this specific religion, so ingrained that yeah, I would imagine you start to question that piece, it becomes very offensive.
Oh yeah, for sure. Then he draws belief on one door and disbelief on the other door, and he's saying, I want to ask you the question, do you believe or do you not believe? And you need to go through the door that corresponds to, which it is. And this, I love Paxton in this moment. She's like, well, maybe we should thank our really super neat new friend, Mr. Reed. He's made a lot of excellent points. And I think, we should go through the disbelief door, right? The door on the right, Sister Barnes? Like they taught us in school, the right door. And Barnes is not getting that at all. And she's like, no, I think what matters is what we actually believe. And so we need to go through the door that says belief, which is the one on the left. And she also points out, like you said, that there are lots of fallacies and holes in the narrative that he has spun. And we get that low angle shot one more time. And then the girls proceed to go into the basement. And it's like, what was that film with the basement that everybody went gaga over and I didn't like? A couple of years ago. Yes. I got really like strong Barbarian vibes.
Yeah, like once you enter, you are not coming out.
Yeah. You're going into the belly of the beast. I mean, this is really foolish. I mean, it's sort of like climbing into the trunk of the kidnapper. Like you're done.
Yeah, you already went further into the hearth of this setting. You went down the hall. I mean, you went inside, despite knowing certain things. You went down the hallway, knowing full well that there was a blueberry candle burning. And now you're descending into like. I think that had I been in this movie, like, or if I was experiencing this and had gotten as far as his little sanctuary area, I would have been like, do anything to make him keep mansplaining in this area. do not go to another location with a hippie.
No.
That's from 30 Rock. I don't know. But yeah, you don't go to a second location, but you surely don't go to a third location.
No. But they do, and they end up in the basement, and the basement, of course, is the creepiest basement that there ever was. It's all concrete walls, and it's, there's rainwater dripping in from the ceiling. The ceiling is like super high up, and there's this high window that would be impossible to reach, but they try anyway. They put a chair on top of a table, and as they're realizing that there's no way to get up to that window, this loose board with 3 nails falls down on the floor. And Barnes has stolen a letter opener from upstairs, and she gives it to Paxton. And she says that when she says the magic words, magic underwear, that Paxton should attack Reed. And it has to be Paxton because his eyes are too much on Barnes at this point. And then we get the prophet, and here's where I check out. Yeah. I mean, I'm out.
I
But
remember we went to see this together,
yeah,
and I said this before, this was my most anticipated movie of this year. I was so obsessed with seeing it. And so we went fairly quickly after it came out in theaters. And I was in it. Like, I was in it so hardcore. And then this occurred, and I like took a little step out of it, and then took a big step out, and then got angry.
well, let's get you there again,
Let's
Miss
get me there.
Quinn. So this woman who's sort of shrouded, like literally like in a shroud, comes walking in with a lantern and a pie. Was kind of funny. I think it must be Paxton is like, Mr. Reed, Mrs. Reed, is that you? Still, like, again, like all evidence to the contrary, and still hoping that she exists. Mr. Reed plays the song Creep upstairs, and it's coming down through this like pipe into the basement. And he's singing along, and that's like one of the best things ever.
Oh, heck yeah.
But Barnes goes past this creepy old, battered up woman, in these like tattered, I don't know, gauzy clothes. And she goes up the stairs, and she finds that there's a door in the middle of the stairs that she hadn't noticed before. But when she looks under the crack of the door, she sees that there's a matchbox sitting in the middle of the floor on this carpet. And so that'll be important. Mr. Reed is upstairs. He's writing down the timings of everything that has happened. And I think I liked that. I mean, that suggests to me that he's been through this process many, many times. And so he's just sort of keeping a log of this particular interaction. And then he explains what's going to happen with the prophet. She's going to eat the pie. She's going to die because he's poisoned it with belladonna and something. And then she's going to come back to life and report back, what she sees on the other side. But right then, Topher Grace, Elder Price, what's his name? I don't know.
I don't know what his name is in this, but it sure is Elder something. And I don't think it's Price.
No, I know it isn't, but that would be hilarious.
No, why couldn't it have been?
too much of a nod, I think. But anyway, so he arrives, and now it's like snowing and blustery and blizzardy outside, and he's saying that these two missionaries had on their route to come and see him, and did they stop by? And Mr. Reed is in his full charm mode, and he's like, "Oh no, oh goodness, no! You're the first person I've spoken to today." And the girls are at the top of the stairs, and they're screaming, but Topher can't hear them because there is metal in the walls and the ceilings, and this is kind of like a vault, and there's no way for sound to carry all the way to the front door. But they pull the rug little by little, and they get the matches. That's kind of a nice moment. But when they descend back down into this basement, Paxton says that the prophet has moved. Her head's in a slightly different position than it was before. And as she's explaining this to Barnes, who doesn't think so, the prophet has now come right behind Paxton, and there's a prophet jump scare. And the prophet says that she saw clouds, and I don't know what else she says, just a bunch of...
Yeah, I needed my subtitles for that in the theater, because I was like, this is lost on me, and I'm already kind of one foot out the door, so...
I don't know, clouds, and I don't think she says anything about angels. I think Paxton fills that in later. But the important part is she says it's not real. And then Mr. Reed takes the prophet away, and Barnes says that he hasn't really shown them a miracle. What he's done is shown them a magic trick.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get the Taco Bell E. coli story. Do you remember that part, Quinn?
Yeah, a little. I may be fuzzy on details. I know that she there was an E. coli outbreak at her local Taco Bell when she was like in middle school, and she was the only survivor, but she did die or like have a death experience and then came back.
Yeah, and she said, it's like all near death experiences. When your brain is deprived of oxygen, it will like show you the most, insane and amazing things. And so that's why the statements of people who've had them are somewhat similar about the bright light and seeing loved ones and or angels and that kind of thing. But then all of a sudden, Reed slashes Barnes's throat with a box cutter, and there is a kind of a nice shot where the blood is spilling onto her hands. And Paxton books it away and is trying to get out. And Barnes is screaming, but there's no sound, and the blood is coming down, and it's kind of a scary moment.
It is a scary moment, and it is also it occurs right after Barnes does say magic underwear, which is the cue for Paxton to cut Mr. Reed. And so it's kind of confusing if you look away at all as to what is actually going on, and did Paxton attempt to cut him and then he slashed Barnes, or but yeah. So it's a confusing moment. I think it's pretty well done in that way too. Yeah.
Paxton comes back because there's no way to escape at this moment, and Barnes is like really dead, but Reed is saying that's okay, she'll come back, and she doesn't come back. And so then he pivots and he says that they're actually in a simulation. He digs out this piece of metal from Barnes's arm. Oh man, bit of nasty body horror in this moment. But he says that she's an NPC in a simulation, and see, this is the like computer chip that proves it, and that's why she's not coming back to life. And he's talking about the simulation theory, and he tells the story of the butterfly dream, where a man dreamed he was a butterfly, but then when he woke up, he wondered if he was actually a butterfly that dreamed he was a man. And she says, now here again, if I wasn't out before, now I'm really out, because Paxton, as David Chen on his podcast says, she seems to have gotten a personality implant.
Yeah.
She's like a completely different person.
Yeah, with an intelligence update.
Yeah. But she is, her demeanor completely changes, and she's very Barnesy in this moment. And I heard somebody defend that and say that Barnes had inspired her, but you can't inspire somebody to be a completely different person.
I don't buy that. I don't like it. I won't hear of it.
So she says she doesn't believe in simulation theory, and she doesn't believe it was a miracle. She says he's improvising because the prophet went off script, and she thinks that the first woman died. He switched out her body with another woman's body, and that woman went off script and said, when she said it's not real, to tip them off.
Yeah.
That it wasn't a real miracle. And there's this and he's like, yeah, but that would mean that, there's this other woman, and where is she, and all this other stuff. And she's like, I don't know. There's like another room. And that doesn't seem to be the case. And then she moves the table out of the way, and she finds that there's this hatch, that leads down into this deeper level of the house. What is this house, Quinn?
Yeah, I don't know, because it is like, and this is where you go back to the kind of opening and getting into this place and it being sort of fairy tale like. it feels like it's not none of it is real. Like it couldn't be this structure in any way.
Mm-hmm.
It does look like a tiny bungalow. It doesn't even look big enough to have that sanctuary room, let
Mm-hmm.
alone this like ever long, nonstop, everlasting, you know, basement that's like 8 layers.
Right. Exactly.
I think there's a problem too when I'm going to say this, like when I'm okay with the idea that the logistics don't add up and that we're supposed to see this as kind of a world that we don't know or understand because we can't put ourselves there. But when you really don't understand where someone is going, and that's with Barbarian too, I think like the idea that you don't have, like if you're not set up with a layout in any way, that
mm-hmm.
anything can happen and any door can be, you can find another door, and it's like Alice in
Mm,
Wonderland. It's
mm.
so convoluted that it takes away from the world building that they did in the first half.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I was just flashing back to Presence, this other movie that we recently watched, and Soderbergh was very intentional in showing us the entire layout of that house in the very opening shots, like maybe even before the credits. You know, we just get a tour basically of the entire place, and there are lots of ways to do that. But in this case, you're right. It's like, well, of course, if we don't know what this place is like, then any door can lead anywhere.
Yeah, and I don't think that's the point of what is I don't like it. It doesn't match up with the idea of like you have all the answers in front of you. You just need to put it together yourself and see that it doesn't make sense or that it does make sense. But if we don't have it, like he's saying that in the beginning, like I gave you the answers. I said there's metal in the wall. I had this candle burning the entire time. I kept making up lies about my wife, like I get it. Like I like that it was all set out there. And he's saying it's kind of on you because you didn't see the logic there. You were very single-minded in wanting to deliver your message while I was trying to subtly deliver a different one that you were tone deaf to. But like in this case, that's not there for us. It's like I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. But she finds this hatch, and she's like, or Reed says, you should only go down there if you want to know the one true religion. And so she says she is going to go down there because she wants to know the truth. And so she climbs down, she sees the prophet's dead body, she goes through all these doors. I mean, I really don't understand um, the layout of this house. But anyway, when she gets to the last door, she finds that it's locked with her bike lock. And she finds the key, of course, is in her jacket pocket. And so she goes and finds all these women in all these metal cages who are being misted. Apparently, it's a very cold room. Um, it's like, now I'm so out. It's like I should have left the theater.
Oh, this is where anger strikes in Quinn because I'm not gonna watch a movie with women in cages being misted and being kept sick and coughing. Like, I'm not gonna watch that movie. I won't. But you got me so invested that I am still sitting in this seat. It's so much so that I'll rewatch this movie again. I said that already. I just don't ever want to think about this part because when I think about it more, I get more and more angry. But yeah, and then she's like horrified, and he reveals the true religion, which is control.
Yeah, he makes her say it. I mean, and he's like, correct or something. Yeah, he's really insufferable. He is like,
Yes.
and he's so smug and so like, ugh, like contemptuous of her. Um, and not contemptuous, but what do I mean? Like it's like insulting,
Yeah, he is condescending towards her because he's
condescending.
so much smarter and more experienced.
Yes. And so the women are in, he says, well, one beautiful thing that happens is when she, sees that this is happening, she immediately takes off her coat and she starts tending to one of the women. And I'm going to get a little choked up. I think that's just a beautiful, you know, portrait of her character, which has been manipulated, for the story. But, flashback to the beginning of the movie, this is a totally Paxton move that
Yeah.
she wouldn't even think twice, that she sees somebody in need and she takes off her coat, even though there are many, many other people.
Yeah.
There's no chance to save them all. But the person who's right in front of her, she will, or at
Yeah.
least try.
Yeah. And he's like, yeah, you don't have to do that because they're cool here. Like they want to be here. They put
Uh-huh.
themselves here. And then he like demonstrates that by like grabbing a nail clipper. It looked like a dog like nail clipper. And
Mm-hmm.
she holds her hands out and he clips her nail and he's talking about something and then he clips her finger off
Yeah.
and oh
And I don't think it's the Wilhelm scream, but it's some terrible scream sound effect.
yeah.
Um, but he says that, Paxton and Barnes, they've been told what to believe their whole life. They've been controlled because religion is just, a matter of control. And they even control, the undergarments that they wear. And at this point, he's standing behind Paxton in this really creepy pose. And she's like, "What?" And he says, "The magic underwear." And she stabs him in the throat with the letter opener and runs. And Paxton finds Botticelli's map of hell, and it's that upside down triangle. And also, we didn't mention, but it's in the poster, it's in everything, that there's a model of the house that Reed has, and he's been moving these figures around in this little house. And but she winds up back or he encounters her. I don't know exactly the logistics, but anyway, they're back in the basement and he is there and he stabs her in the gut. And so he's bleeding from his neck. Now she's got this probably fatal wound in her gut. And he is gasping and he looks very desperate and he tells her to pray for them. And then she asks us if he's ever heard of the Great Prayer Experiment. This is so overwritten. It's just like,
there's no way that this is happening while they're both dying, and her stomach wound. No.
and it's like, did they just lose steam? The first part is so well put together. I just don't understand. But Mr. C asked me, is it a good movie? And I said, it's half a good movie. It just falls apart. But anyway, the Great Experiment proves that prayer doesn't work. It doesn't matter if you pray over a dying patient or not. Has nothing to do with the outcome. However, she thinks it's really beautiful that we, look after each other. And it's really good to think about somebody else besides yourself. And he sort of collapses on her shoulder. He's sobbing. And then all of a sudden, it's Deus ex Barnes, and she stabs him in the head with the board. Remember the board from before with the 3 nails, stabs him in the head, and he dies outright.
I guess I question that. Why is that necessary? What does it
Well,
do?
Well, because then we get Paxton's face and she looks like she's witnessing a miracle. And I think the ending, and we're almost to the ending, cue balls, but it's like the ending is ambiguous, and so I think this is part of the ambiguity. Like if this happened, then miracles are real. But we can talk about what we think, or if it matters, what we think. But we see there's another really cool shot, sort of reminiscent of the candle shot before. We see Paxton seemingly running through the model of the house, and then the camera goes to the door, and she comes in through the door and finds the key that she finds something. I don't know. It's not the key to the door because she goes out the window, and there's snow in the backyard. She sees a butterfly and it lands on her hand, but then the next shot, there's no butterfly. And then that's it. Movie ends, blackout. Sophie Thatcher is singing Knocking on Heaven's Door. Credits roll. And we're left to wonder if she died in the basement with Reed or if she's made this miraculous escape.
Yeah.
And she's saved herself and all the women as well.
Yeah. I don't even think I think that they I think they probably lost a lot of people where they lost us. And so whatever the attempt was with the end to make some point that left people thinking, that's not what I was thinking about. Like I do get it and I understand it, but like, unfortunately, the way that it's laid out makes it so that I don't care about that anymore, even though I should. I know I should, but like, I only care about going back and seeing if I could, like, in my brain, rewrite so that they don't go into the basement or that there isn't a profit. I also am concerned because I get that Mr. Reed is not right and has done this, to many women. Why is he targeting women?
Right.
Because men would be the ones that would be probably more powerful in the church and causing more danger and trouble and getting others to join more than women. Why is he targeting young women who are 18, 19 years old? Like, what is that doing? I don't get that. Like, I don't get that.
It doesn't make any sense that it would be like, I don't know if I'm sure they exist, Church of Latter-day Saints people do not at me. I'm sure that they exist. But when I see Mormons, it's two dudes.
Yeah.
And so I was so offended by that. Like, okay, if you have the cages, that would be fine if there were some men.
Yes.
And it would make a whole lot more sense.
Yeah. And I also think that when I ask that question, why not men? Somebody could answer that question and say, maybe men wouldn't go into that second room or that third room. But I question that because within the film, they even show us that Topher Grace comes back to his house in order to give him literature.
That's right.
Not because he suspects anything, but he thinks that maybe he could save this guy.
Right.
So much so that he's so concerned about these two women, and there's a weather incident occurring where there's snow everywhere, but he fucking comes back to give him the Church of Latter-day Saint material pamphlet. Mm-hmm. So don't tell me that he wouldn't have gone into a second room and then into the basement, because Elder Topher Grace would. Yes. And the film is telling me that he would, because it tells me that he'll come back in whatever situation in order to deliver his message.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely right. I mean, it's a very strange world. And I don't know what he's trying to say about, men and women. And I it's lazy, it's slipshod, it's just awkward, and it had such promise, and that's what made it such a disappointment.
Yeah, it's like somebody wrote this inner exchange between these three characters in the first living room area and then rewrote it and rewrote it, rewrote it, and like just got it to perfection. Spent so much time doing that. They're like, well, I got to add something on the end. And it's something so crazy weird. And the
Yeah,
stipulation thing, like, I think that's like, why are you taking us down that road to begin with?
I think, that's a cool story. I've used that story myself, but I mean, talking about like, how do you know what's real and what's not real? But he says that the chip in her arm is a computer chip, and actually it's a form of birth control. And part of his thing is he's like, have you ever known of a missionary that used birth control? And, she says no, but in the beginning, they were talking about pornography, and the way she does the monologue, it's clear that that wasn't the only film she's ever seen, you know?
Yeah.
And
And
so,
it's like he's already established himself as a person that believes that people will buy into these ideas and take and pick and choose what they want from it, because he uses the example of the polygamy. So then if that's true, then why can't a Mormon have a birth control device, an implant or an IUD, or take birth control? Because he already believes that people are picking and choosing what they want to suit their own values, world views, and conveniences.
but I think, at the beginning, we didn't mention every single element. We mentioned a lot, but when he brings the tray out with the candle, it's got soda on it, cola, he says. And so, he is trying to test them, at all these different points. They don't, I mean, God knows you should never, in any situation, drink or eat something that's offered by a stranger. I mean, especially, you know, I don't know. I don't. If I don't know the person, I don't accept food or drink from them. But.
Yeah.
But I mean, these girls are not that worldly wise. I mean, Barnes seems like it, but she's kind of dumb when it matters. Um, and
Yeah,
yeah,
and
it's.
Paxton said that she's gained so much weight on her mission because, indicating that she's taken
Mm-hmm.
homemade goods that these folks have made. So it's already establishing that she is going to drink the drink.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she doesn't. I don't think they drink the cola.
No, they don't.
Um,
And they make the excuse that they're just not that thirsty. But he's like, oh, I'm sorry, it's got caffeine in it. And they say, well, you know, it doesn't explicitly forbid soda, but we're just not thirsty.
yeah,
I don't know. It's a mess.
it's a
It's
mess, but it's an endearing mess. At
I.
least in the
Mhm.
beginning, so much so that you can go back to it, but I think you just don't watch the end because I don't think it's delivering a unified message, and it's so tight in the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. I just feel like it unravels, it falls apart.
Yeah,
However you want to say it. I just, yeah,
it's a
started off
shame.
so good.
Yeah, and there isn't a moment even in the second half in which the acting is off. Like it's always on. They're always there. These three actors are fantastic in this, and they are the reason I think that it is watchable and that you can go back to it. And there's a lot of interesting pieces too. And the dialogue in the beginning is worth the price, but it pisses me off so much.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, you're saying the acting is good, even with the personality transplant that Paxton goes through. I mean, it's she's good in that role. It's just that doesn't seem there's the writing got in the way of the character at that point. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if they intended for Barnes to survive, or I originally, or I don't know what happened, but it doesn't make any sense. And it's it's just super annoying that all of a sudden this person, becomes a different person.
Yeah.
And it's not Chloe East's fault. She does great with it. It's just bad writing.
Yeah.
Well, here's
Have
some
you seen
trivia.
her in other things? I'm sorry.
I don't know her. No, I don't know her at all.
Either. And so I thought that I never would have thought she would have been the final girl. I would have thought Sophie Thatcher for sure, which I think is a cool thing to do as well. It's like the Janet Leigh switch up type thing.
And there's a little Easter egg or some whatever you want to call it. Sophie Thatcher is singing the song at the end. And there's a bit in the beginning where Paxton is telling Barnes, you should sing more. You've got a really lovely singing voice. And she's like, oh, I don't really like it. And she's like, well, I know I can't sing. I just enjoy singing. But, you're really good. I thought that was kind of cute.
So cute.
But here's some trivia, Quinn.
Okay.
Hugh Grant once stated in an interview, I'm getting bored of playing obvious roles and being typecast. Writer-directors Scott Beck and Brian Wood saw this interview and wrote the role of Mr. Reed with Hugh as their top choice for the role.
Well, brilliant.
I mean, we've said it to each other, but I mean, this movie really wouldn't be worth watching if he weren't in it.
No, and I watched it twice in like the span of 24 hours or something. And the second time watching it, which would have been like the third time I saw it, you could watch that first half and just focus on what he's doing with his face. And it's like out of this world talent.
Yeah.
So good.
Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East were both raised Mormon and were able to give valuable insight into their religion when shooting the movie. They are no longer Mormons. Near the end of the movie, Paxton, during her escape, sees a poster of the 9 Circles of Hell, or Dante's Inferno. In Dante's Inferno, the main character has to escape through the belly button of the beast. Earlier, Paxton says the only way out is through, and when she sees the poster of Dante's Inferno, she thinks she has to escape through the cellar door she came from earlier. Paxton gets stabbed in her belly button before being able to escape the cellar and escapes afterwards. I guess.
I don't like belly buttons and I don't like to talk about them.
I'm sorry, I forgot about that. That is a feature of Quinn's personality.
Yeah, sure is.
All right, well, I'll read the 5 stars if you want to read the 1 stars or vice versa.
Well, I usually read the 5 stars.
Okay.
But I can do whatever you prefer me do.
Well, why don't you read the 5 stars?
Okay. I'm more comfortable with 5 stars. I don't know. Okay, this is from Mila. If Hugh Grant ever wants to lock me in his basement and debate existentialism and religion and listen to Radiohead, don't come looking for me. Wow, honey. I mean, I think that's going to happen for the first hour, but then you're going to be in a cage being misted for the rest of your life.
Yeah. There's that.
The second 5-star review is from Aaron B. Watching. Not for everyone, apparently, but definitely for me. Every line of dialogue invites you to have an opinion, and I like that. I'm on board. I like that too. Okay. Next one is from Sadie Solomon. 5-star. So genuinely scary and creepy. Hugh Grant is amazing. Really funny at times. There were parts I also could not watch. I'm so impressed with how well thought out this movie was. So many twists and turns. I love Sophie Thatcher. I also watched this on a snow day at 7 a.m., if that matters. That's interesting. I don't know, Sadie. I don't agree with the idea that it was well thought out.
Yeah, I think the first part was well thought out, and then I think it just sort of descends into madness and not in a good way.
Right, yeah.
Pandy Fackler gave it a 0.5 star. Actually, the most boring and pretentious movie I have ever seen in my life. Tries too hard to be something it could never be. I'd rather watch paint dry than ever see this piece of dog shit again. Oh my.
Oh God. I get like that idea. I don't find it pretentious in any way except like the idea that they so quickly shit the bed. But like I think it's pointing out the pretentiousness,
Yeah.
like, and it's highlighting that, and we're supposed to understand that. I don't know. Whatever. Okay.
Well, no, I think that is one of the things that they were going for, and I think mansplaining is really a beautiful way to characterize this person. He thinks he has all the answers, and he doesn't. At the end of his life, he's just as scared as anyone would be, and wanting there to be some consolation and wanting to be, comforted, just like anyone would be. So
Yeah.
he's not special in any way.
No.
Samuel Leighton gave it a half star. Just so poorly written. For example, the dialogue being Hugh Grant monologuing at you for over an hour. Not very thought-provoking for a movie trying so hard to be. I half agree. I mean, I think the first half is thought-provoking. Like, why do we believe what we believe? That's one of the central questions that I ask my students.
Yeah, and I think it brings up that idea that's kind of new to films, and maybe our culture, and the idea of like how polite are you and to what detriment.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's even a moment, I think this is before they go into the basement, where I think Sophie Thatcher says something like, I've been wondering all night how you were going to make the idea of our murder our ideas.
Right.
And that's not really what he's doing, but that is definitely, I think, something that we're supposed to consider in this movie.
Well, definitely. And I mean, it's sort of back to the barbarian thing. Like, why would you go into the basement? Like, when I watched Barbarian with my boyfriend, he was just like, there's no way. And there has been, if you've seen Barbarian, there's a lot that leads up to that moment where you're sort of like, girl, run. Like, it doesn't make any sense why this person would stay there. But then again, it does, because we are so concerned with not offending other people and being polite. And if you want an examination of that, you can watch Speak No Evil. If you, I recommend it to Quinn. She didn't watch the original, which I think is a lot harsher than the American version. But both of them deal with that idea of politeness sort of being your downfall.
Yeah.
All right, Ahir gave this a half star. Hugh Grant humming creep, meowing, and saying badies weirdly would have been a 5-star on a good day, but this was a waste of time that I could have spent on my assignment due in 2 hours.
What assignment do you have? Watching Heretic. But yeah, no, I agree. Like, those are sort of highlights for me too.
Yeah.
All
definitely.
of those. I didn't like the meowing. Well, I did. It scared me so much that like I had to ask you specifically if that is what happened.
No, yes.
I watched it. I was like, so I was gonna rewind or go back track to that. I don't want to hear him say it again. Bodies. I'm a weirdo. I don't know.
Oh, he's so good. He's so good, you guys. So if you're interested in Hugh Grant's career or this performance, I mean, you could just go ahead and watch Paddington 2 again. I mean, he's delightful in that. But this performance is really strong, and the women are really strong too. And I don't know this Chloe East person, but I'm a fan.
I am a fan as well. She's so good. So organic, I think, up to a point, but like just in general, I feel like she's just a fresh, I don't want to say fresh face, but man, she's delightful.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
She's refreshing.
So any final thoughts then, Quinn, on Heretic?
No, this is one I like probably want to keep talking about. and just in general. Because, like, again, I'm invested to a point. I would love to hear what our religion teacher friend has to say about it.
Yeah, me too.
And I would watch the first half of this movie like pretty much every other day.
It's
Um,
it's really tight. I mean, it's like a play. It's really well done the first half. Yeah.
so tight. Yeah. And I even just like I could think of maybe 5 ways in which it could go different. Off the top of my head, I just don't believe we needed to go down the road we did.
Yeah. And I mean, some of the stuff, I mean, I sort of get what that one reviewer is saying, that it's pretentious. I mean, I think a lot of us might be familiar with Dante's Inferno, or, any of these stories where the protagonist has to go, into danger, some form of danger, in order to, be resurrected, or, it's that whole monomyth thing and the hero's journey and all that stuff that's sort of like talked about in the beginning of the film. I just don't think it's done very well at all. And if that's what they were going for in terms of the hero's journey, then I think it should be definitive that she actually survives at the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah. And it's like you get to the point where, for me, again, I grew to absolutely adore this actress in this role, but I didn't care anymore at the end, about her fate. And asked me in the first half if I care about her. I certainly do. It's just like they bungle it so horribly that like you don't care anymore. And that's the real problem here, is that like well, I can go back to it because I think the first half is so tight, like we've said. It's just like it's such a tragedy to see something with that could be so beautiful and such potential to be so thought provoking, but then when you fuck it up so bad that like it's hard to even remember that potential
Mm,
unless you rewatch it, like you've made a horrible mistake. And I
yeah,
mean, I'm not making movies, but like I just that
that's
sucks.
okay.
That sucks.
No, but we consume movies and we can be dissatisfied with our experience, definitely. I
Yeah,
mean, we talked in the parking lot after this film for like 45 minutes. I mean, we were like hot.
yeah,
Um, but I mean, I guess I would say, the performances are great, the cinematography is great, um, the writing in the first half is great, and then it's not. I mean, the performances remain good, but I mean,
yeah.
yeah,
And
boy.
this was like in the middle of seeing a string of movies that I just hated. And I was concerned about like, are you ever gonna like a movie again? Are you, um and there were movies in that string of movies that I saw that I hated that I'm not gonna even waste a second talking about them. And yet this one, we were talking like 45 minutes in the parking lot. We have we're doing this episode on it. We rewatched it. Like it is definitely, there is something there that is very valuable, but it is not whole.
But I don't think we're like, if the writers intended, and some reviewer had pointed this out, that when people have conversations after the movie, it's because of the movie and the questions that it raises. But we're not talking about those questions. We're talking about story questions and choices that the writers made.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that's what they were going for. I think
No.
they were trying to get us like in an intro to philosophy class, think about these questions. And we're not talking about, you know, is there an afterlife, and what do we believe and why do we believe it? We're talking about how there's a breakdown in the storytelling.
Yeah, it's like eating a really well cooked, balanced meal and then shoving like Oreos in your mouth. Like you don't even get the benefit of that well balanced meal because you fucked it up so badly afterwards.
All right, cue balls. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Quinn, for joining me for this discussion of Heretic. What's next?
Yes, I was thinking we should do something new again. These are fun.
Okay. All right. And I don't know, who's to say? And on the Stefanisode coming up, we will be discussing Smile 2. So we look forward to that. Thank you, Cue Balls, for all your support. It means the world of horror to us, truly. Now, Quinn, one thing I forgot to say that I really have to is that it's sad when a mother has to speak the words that condemn her own son. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, fully.
I forgot to put it in last time.
I will always agree with that.
Maybe that should be our closing every single week.
I like it. It might be more fun than more dicks.
Yeah. We sort of lost the thread of more dicks. I mean, we still think there should be more full frontal in American films, in any film.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
But
I mean, I'm not gonna say no to more dicks.
I'm going to put that on Instagram.
I'm not gonna say no to more dicks.
All right, Quinn, thanks so much. I'm going to cut it off here. Thanks, Cue Balls. Stay tuned. We've got great things in store. And it's sad when a mother has to speak the words that condemn her own son.
More dicks!